Well, hello and welcome to PM Express. It's that beautiful hour of the day, and you should be sitting back, relaxing, and waiting for the topic today. And we have a very, very interesting topic for you today. Regulation anxiety. Exactly. Regulation anxiety. What do I mean by that? Folks, recently we've heard in the news about all the mishaps within the banking and financial sector. And some of the revelations coming out are mind-blowing and shocking as to how could it have happened. Some of them have gone on for years and years and years, and we hear, auditors and banking supervisors, awards being offered to these same banks, and yet still 7 banks have gone down the drain. And so we, the media, have all focused on the banks because, of course, that's the in thing now. It's the banking, But I just want us all to sit back and ask ourselves, that is it only the banking? Because there is a major problem with regulation. Who is looking at the real estate industry? Real estate's growing up everywhere, and it seems to have outgrown a regulator, if indeed there is one. And it should be checked because it's an industry where lots of money and lots of jobs are at stake there. Yet still, we don't seem to regulate it. You go to FDA, and then they come and tell us about dyes in oil and faulty plugs and stuff. Standards boards cannot just manage. All regulators seem to be overwhelmed. Even churches. The last time we had Professor Opuni, Dr. Opuni Frimpong here, and he was confessing that, look, churches seems to be on the loose. There are a few that are being regulated. The others, one man has a mic, and then he starts a shop. You ask yourself, petrol stations. Whose idea as to what proximity should be a petrol station? Every corner, every street, no matter where it is, there is a petrol station, and there's just too many petrol stations. Is it being regulated? So the question or the issue on the table, indeed, is that we are in a regulation crisis, and it's only that the banking fraternity is this now. Look at what happened to Galamsey. We had to bring in the army, the police. I mean, are all these sectors going to get to a stage where we need to bring in Operation Vanguard to now go and check what the churches are doing, what the mines are doing, what petroleum are doing? Or indeed there's something that can be done that will start bringing sanity? Because I don't know of any sector that we can boast of and say, as for this sector, the regulator there is making sure that things are being done properly. Maybe you may know, but I don't know one yet. A sector that we can say, for this sector, the regulator of that sector is so strong, is so, on the ball that everything is done there. And until that is done, then maybe we shouldn't cast a stone at the banking and financial fraternity, because we are all in the loop. My name is Nana Nsakwa IV, Chief of the Little Republic of Akwemo, Edumasa. Indeed, who's regulating me from becoming a republic. But when I come back, I have just the person to speak to this issue. It's going to be a patriotic, nationalistic conversation to find out how did we get here and what can we do to get out of this unregulated quagmire. Don't go. Well, thank you very much for staying with me in the studio to discuss regulation anxiety. It's Roxanne Dafiamepo, Honorable Member of Parliament for South Dai, and also is a member of the Legal, Constitutional and Parliamentary Committee, and also the Judicial Committee. So if there's anybody who's capable of looking at why it is that we are laxing in regulation, I think he's the right man, and he was really not scheduled to come here today. So my viewers and I are really say a big thank you for cancelling so many things to be here this evening. That's what I call for God and country. So my brother Roxanne, thank you so much. Let me say he's also a legal practitioner, as a lawyer. Let me add that because he has earned it.
Nana, thank you. It's been a while. It's been about a month or so So it's good to be here.
Good to have you too.
It's good to serve in this capacity. Today, no politics.
No.
Strictly law and public policy, public interest debate.
Yeah.
And I hope we can do justice to the subject within the 1 hour that your employer has
has regulated to me.
Yes.
But because, I mean, the banking thing has brought this issue, let us start with the banking thing. And one person who didn't want to throw the first stone at the banking fraternity, because I sit back and I'm thinking, look, hold on. But looking at the banking fraternity, I mean, could the regulator have done something, or the regulator is overwhelmed?
Thank you very much, Nana. Let me once again use the opportunity to say good evening to my constituents.
Yes.
Customarily, Peki Kwali Kweve Tongo, especially my Towe Asu Kwesi of Tongo Chanakme. Nana, you see, BOG, yes or no to your question, the BOG did take some steps. You know, we are in 2018, and these matters, as the reports are being churned out, as they hit the public domain and they hit the public discourse. The details are such that BOG got to know of this sometime 2014-15, and even took steps to salvage the situation. And so I'm not sure if you have copies of some of the reports, but if you look at the Capital Bank, for instance, their situations were such that BOG decided to resuscitate them, as it were, to give them oxygen, so that they can come back to life. To the extent that you could be given over 600 million Ghana cedis to be able to stay afloat and work and save the employment of multitude of Ghanaians, young graduates, and who you have employed, and so are looking up to the entity to grow. You know, to the extent that a lot of some other banks were also assisted so they could stay afloat. But I have asked the question in some other domain that why is it that as a country we are saying that a bank with a minimum capital of 120 million Ghana cedis cannot operate as a bank, and that it has to be increased to 400 million for a bank to operate for that purpose? Because the minimum capital has been 120 million. Why are we increasing it? Nobody seems to have asked this question. Why are we saying that the minimum capital for a given bank in this republic, in this state, the Republic of Ghana, should not be 120 million and that it should be 400 million?
It's not for a strong backing.
Hold on. Okay. So, because 400 million is $80 million. Why are we saying so? Why, for instance, we have it tiered the banks into categories? Because I only know of the rural banks and the commercial banks. And that is what they call tiers. No, there should be a tier 1 bank consisting of certain banks, a tier 2, a tier 3, before even the rural banks. So that those who cannot manage 400 million can manage, for instance, 200 million. So that I can operate within my scope. So if I cannot manage 200 million, I should be able to manage, for instance, 100 million and still be called a bank, but I'll offer certain services as a bank. So if, for instance, I am maybe Roxanne's bank, I don't have to compete with the Barclays Bank of this world, or the Stanchas of this world, or the Eco banks of this world. I should be able to stay in my constituency in South Dine as Roxanne's bank or Dav's bank and operate and be able to offer employment to the people that are fit to be employed.
Is it the privilege
but still doing banking.
Is it the privilege of being called a bank instead of a savings and loans? Or
no, the savings and loans is also another category. But we are told that they don't do banking. They only do. They don't offer interest on. The categories are such that they don't do deposits. All right. They only do collections and they pay to the substantive banks, savings and loans. Yeah. But my point is that within the mainstream structure that we call as banks, yes, the regulator should be able to have hierarchically structured it in such a way that we could have, after all, in the universities we have a first class, we have a second upper, we have a second lower, we have a third class. So let the banks also operate like that. And let us still have the polytechnics that will offer the HND. And let us still have the training colleges that will offer the diploma in teaching. So let us, by any means necessary, let us have the savings and loans. Let us have the rural banks that are dotted in our various constituencies and districts. But let the mainstream banking also be hierarchically structured so people can aspire to grow. Now, leaving the generals to the specifics, we must also look at the conduct of some of the directors of some of these banks. Because as much as we are seeking to move the searchlight from the institutions as we call banks to the regulator, which is the central bank, we cannot, in all this, disassociate the conduct of persons who are appointed as directors. Because you see, in law, when you are appointed a director of a company, you are placed in a fiduciary position. You are placed in a position of trust. Your duty to the entity and not to anybody is to ensure that the best interest of the company is always served. But the kind of reports we are reading, the kind of reports that is, the details are so gory that a lot of the directors of these companies just went to pursue their own personal interest, completely oblivious, or they gloss over the fact that I do not even think that they knew that by being a director of a bank or being of a corporate institution, they were placed in a fiduciary position, which meant that their duty was to protect the interests of the entity, whether or not your personal interest will be adversely affected. And so in respect of the banking subsector, this has been the problem. And cultural incidences have also fed into it. So that...
But it happens with 7 banks. So then one would say, where was the regulator?
You see,
is the regulator overwhelmed?
Nana,
are there too many banks?
I agree that today the focus is on the regulator, but you can't do this dispassionately without dissecting and bisecting the issues very well, dispassionately. Yes, the regulator, yes. But the other question is, when the regulator plays 2 banks, the Capital Bank and indeed the UT Bank, in receivership a year ago, in fact tomorrow, either today or tomorrow will be exactly a year, because that day, I recall we were on recess when this thing hit us. When they placed them in receivership, to the extent that public monies will have to be advanced to cater for the liabilities and to instruct another public institution to, as it were, in a hostile manner, take over this bank so that depositors' money are not lost. What did the regulator do since then in respect of the other 5 that also sank a few weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago.
You see, I think again, what then happens is that in all these instances, the responsibility plays on the regulator. It's very small, even though, well, no, the blame plays on the regulator. It's actually smaller than the responsibility played, given to them, and therefore you tend to find out that it's still the small players that get to pay. I mean, in this scenario, it's you and I whose money is in the consolidated fund that could have built more roads and send more kids to school for free or whatever it is, has to go and make sure people keep their jobs and people don't lose their savings. And yet still, those who take the decisions, don't seem to bear
Now, let me
brunt.
tell you this. As part of the requirements of banks is the fact that every year they must publish their audited accounts. An audited publication of audited accounts is no small business. I have, since the eruption of this matter, gone back to look at particularly graphic, and they also often use Times because it's cheaper. Look at the publications for instance, in this year, April, and last year, April, because they normally do the publications between April and May. Almost every single bank in this country publicized their audited accounts, and none of them declared that they were insolvent. Each of them declared profits after tax. And somebody pointed it out to me today that it's not simply about declaration of profits. They were also winning awards. We were told as reasonable Ghanaians that some of the banks were even declared as the fastest growing bank. Now, if I work with multimedia and I'm giving 5,000 at the end of the month, and I can save 3,000 at the end of the month, and the bank is declared as the fastest growing, I am want to go and leave my money with them and do a fixed deposit. So in all these regulatory matters, we will even be looking at fraud. Has any of these entities perpetrated fraud or not? What went into the award of some of these matters? What is the role of the regulatory institution in awarding some of these institutions at the end of the financial year on merit? What is their role? Are they in charge or not? If they are not in charge of organizing some of these award events, have they sought to question the basis of some of these awards, knowing very well that they've been home to some of the gory details of what they are put out? So I agree with you to a greater extent that the regulator in this matter went to sleep, woke up one day and thought that it was to back. Yes, you could back, but we'll ask you, where have you been? Because you see, Nana, I have been in a boarding house. I don't know whether you've been in a boarding house.
Yes, I've been in a boarding house.
And you know how boarding life is. You know the role of the senior housemaster. When they say it's siesta, if the senior housemaster doesn't check me for 2 weeks, during the third week, when it's siesta, I'll be loitering about. But if the senior housemaster comes around regularly during siesta, if it is siesta, I'll be forced to sleep. Whether or not the fan in my dormitory is on, I'll be forced to sleep because the senior housemaster will come around with his cane. I have been made to be aware that others were whipped when they were caught by curfew. But if the senior housemaster goes to sleep, it is the normal occurrence of human nature that I'll take advantage of the laxity in the system and misconduct myself. And persons, directors of banks misconducted themselves in this matter. But the regulator must take the greater blame. And not just the Bank of Ghana as the regulator in this matter. There are several other regulatory institutions that have gone to sleep. And I'll refer you to something. You see, I brought this. When he called me, I debated within myself as to what to bring to spice the debate. This is a book by, it's called Statutory Interpretation by Bignon. Every lawyer worth his salt has this book. It's like a second Bible. Yeah. The first Bible is the Black's Laws Dictionary. And it talks about statutory interpretation. And I'll take you to page 126 of the 4th edition. And on paragraph 4, the subheading is Dynamic Processing of Legislation by Enforcement Agencies. I had to comb this to look for this. Dynamic processing of legislation by enforcement agencies. Regulatory agencies are the enforcement agencies. Yeah. And this is what the very learned professor said. He says, insofar as Parliament, and I choose this carefully because I'm also in Parliament. He says that insofar as Parliament does not convey its intention clearly, expressly, and completely, it is taken to require the enforcement agencies who are charged with the duty of applying legislation to spell out the detail of its legal meaning. This may be done either by, then they state the conditions. The point I'm simply making is that when they say, for instance, the FDB must regulate the food industry in this country, it is not for nothing that they are given that power. Because you see, I cannot be sent from Parliament with a whip in hand to do that. And Bignon is saying, when you are given that power, you have a certain duty to fine-tune it. Because you see, Parliament, when we meet, when 275 people meet on behalf of 30 million Ghanaians, then we are fashioning out laws. There are interests that clash. There are experiences that are brought to bear. So we are unable to fine-tune the laws. So it is up to the implementing agencies. That is why they are giving powers to enact what we call delegated legislation, which is the regulations or executive instruments, to fine-tune it. So that if you look at the mother statute and the LI, the fine-tuning, the fine comb is found in the LI. It is the LI that will be enacted to operationalize the Mother Act. So if you take the Road Traffic Act, for instance, the fine-tuning is in the LI. Now, there are issues seriously happening in this country concerning the kind of food that are sold to us. For instance, the reports are bound that the very common palm oil that we use, everyday oil that everybody uses in this country, people are adding artificial additives, colors, to make it look more orange. I don't know. But I don't know what efforts the FDB is making, for instance, in this regard. And we are consuming palm oil supposedly called Zomi in large quantities. That is why today you can find cancer cells in a 6-year-old child. And you want to ask, was he born in Chernobyl? No. But we are finding cancer cells in children because the mother consumes at the time she was pregnant.
See, with the FDB, I mean, we've spoken to them a couple of times, and because they are government institutions, they are unable to shout on the rooftop. But sometimes they give you, they tell you the number of cars they have, the number of, bodies they have, and the areas they have to cover, and you just know, look, it's not going to happen. And so, I mean, is the regulator justified in saying that, listen, I can't do all the work? I mean, recently, I know they were hiring a few more graduates to go and do a few more leg work. I even suggested that, look, why don't you do mystery shopping, where you yourself go and plant something in a particular shop, and then you go around, and so the shop owner should make sure that everything on the shelf is working, because you can find it. They took it on board, but Parliament, executive, having given the ammunition to FDA, who's the regulator, and therefore can't do the job. I mean, is that an excuse?
Nana, it is no excuse. And the key problem is that we have politicized every institution in this country. The executive is unable to bite. Bite is, I use bite advisedly in contest. Nana, if you are my friend and I become the president, I make you, which one do you want to tell me?
Both. Yeah, I think anything with regards to children, environment, I have passion there, so I wouldn't mind going somewhere, an environment board, protection of children.
No, let me give you FDB, because that's what we've moved from BOG to FDB. So, but we'll go back to BOG. Or let me say I've given you Bank of Ghana. You're my friend. So, and you are aware that if a bank fails to publicize its audited accounts after the first quarter, it's an offense, or they are in breach of the law, there must be consequences. But my colleague Adongo, for instance, Isaac Adongo, has been on a crusade against the Ghana Commercial Bank, that they have failed to publicize the audited accounts, way past beyond the statutory period of doing so, and yet nothing is happening. So, using that analogy, you are the head of, but you are the governor of the Bank of Ghana. Banks are misbehaving. I am unable to fire you, even though I appointed you. I am unable to fire you because you are my friend. That is what we have reduced the country to. And therefore, you see that most of these regulatory institutions, where the heads are supposed to be enforcers of the law, they have become they have become persons who do the bidding of the appointing authorities. And so, depending on the government policies of the day, they do things in accordance and in concordance with what the government will decide. You understand my point? And that is the problem. So if as a nation we have come to the point that no, my leader, the Honorable Haruna Idrisu, last week remarked that we've gotten to a stage where we must legislate how many, for instance, how many ministers, for instance, the president should be able to appoint, irrespective of which government is in power. And you know why we cannot have more than 19 cabinet ministers?
No.
Because the Constitution says so.
Of course, okay.
But for the fact that Constitution places a ceiling on that, we could have had, for instance, 19 ministers as cabinet ministers. So my leader is of the opinion that once there's a ceiling placed on president to appointing who belongs to cabinet, the same must be done in respect of the other ministers. That we shouldn't go beyond 65. So with all your deputy ministers, substantive ministers, and regional ministers, you should be able to work within 65 people as your ministers. And that is the point. The regulations must be enforced. Where there are lacunas, where there are loopholes, we enact new ones. I heard the president say yesterday, for instance, that he is of the opinion that SSS should be the exit point at the basic level, so that when you enter school in kindergarten, you don't exit until you get to SS. I love that.
Let me take a break here, because I really want to look at the regulations covering education, and we shall also look at real estate, because these are major fraternities,
transport,
or that affect
nursing.
us. But who is the regulator, and what are they doing? Are they asleep or are they working? Don't go away.